in the morning. Hello, my name is Tommy Sands, and I hope you have the time, taste, and temperament to stay with me for the next while of an evening with the best of folk, traditional music, song, crack, and diversion. From the strange and eerie things that are going on all around us with this fires going around the place, and I'm sure it's the same where you are. We're locked down or locked in or locked up or locked in from going out. In fact, someone said to me the other day that they were locked, simply locked. But I know it's a very difficult time, and we won't deal with that too much tonight because there's plenty of that on TV and radio all around the place. But since folk music is about people, folks, the Germans call it folk, it would be wrong to leave it out because folk music is about escaping, all right, but also connecting with what's going on. I remember a story actually coming into my head. There was a giant used to live around this country here. In fact, he lived over most of Ireland. He was a big man. And all to say he would have been like, maybe 10 foot or something like that, and around that. But anyway, he did all sorts of things. He threw this big stone actually from Carlingford Mountains, the Cooley Mountains over here, right out over the top of Carlingford Lough to the Mourns where I am at the moment here. And this stone is still there to this day, Clough Moor, the big stone, we call it. And anyway, Finn was out in the forest with his followers. He was a great champion of people for people who wouldn't know him and people living in a far off place. But the crack died down a bit after a meal, and Finn looked into the middle distance and he said, "Could anyone tell me what you think is the most beautiful music in the world?" Well, a few of them come up with a suggestion or two. One said, the music of the lark in the morning. Mm-hmm. Not bad. Does Finn any more? Ah, well, there's plenty more. Someone said, the music of a babbling brook. But eventually, it had to come to it. Somebody said, wise man, what do you think is the most beautiful music in the world? And Finn looked into the middle distance and he said, the most beautiful music in the world is the music of what happens. So we'll be singing about what happens tonight, be it good or bad or indifferent. And this is a song that I wrote just about a week ago. It's the newest song you're going to hear in the program tonight. And also later on, I was singing the first song ever sung in Ireland. I'm pretending to do that after a while. But it came about, I was walking up in the forest here, the old oak forest behind us, one of the oldest oak forests in all of Ireland. And I was on my own. There's no one else there. And the birds were singing in a way that I'd never heard birds sing before. They were singing songs as if to say, if you kept a bit quieter, you would hear the beautiful music that's coming out of us. Untrodden flowers almost stepped back a little bit to give me space. The way we don't give nature space sometimes. But anyway, this is a song. It's called Love in Isolation. I walk where no one walks and only trees can see in this forestry of uncertainty. I hear you softly whisper in the gentle breeze. You are near me, and yet so far away from me. Now I cannot see you like it used to be. They say it is the best for you and best for me. From your window you waved at me so tenderly. You are near me, and yet so far away from me. Carried by your kindness to the hard front line, no cover to protect you by the raving tide. No greater love than this can there ever be. You are near me, and yet so far away from me. Now we rest a moment where we still can dream by the healing waters of the Glenshee stream. Our love will grow and flow eternally. You are near me, and yet so far away from me. I walk where no one walks, and only trees can see. Untrodden flowers, they make space for me. I hear your voice in the songbirds' harmony. You are far away, yet so near to me. Well, I hope you're not too far away from us tonight, at least in spirit. And delighted to have you here and me there. There's a sense of here-ness in every awareness, no matter where I wander, be it here or over there or even over thunder. That's the way we go on here at times. Thunder would be a word associated with the Scottish traditions here, and we've got lots of words, of course, coming from the Irish language and the Irish tradition and the Irish way of saying things. Well, no matter who you are or where you are, you're very, very welcome. And usually at this time of the year, myself and my brothers and sister and the Sands family were in Germany, or in fact, we're supposed to be in Germany, I think, this very night. But of course, we're not. And musicians like myself are in little attics like this, saying hello to people that otherwise we couldn't say hello to. And this is a song, actually, I suppose, we're taking advantage of the situation in the sense that we can rest. We don't feel guilty about not being on the road. And we can sit in front of a fire and sing songs like this. This is a song
that comes from home.
Let the circle be wide round the fireside, and we'll soon make room for you. Let your heart have no fear, for there's no strangers here, just friends that you never knew. We will travel along on the wings of song, with a mind that is open and free. If we close our eyes to the other side, we're just half of what we could be. So let the circle be wide round the fireside, and we'll soon make room for you. Let your heart have no fear, for there's no strangers here, just friends that you never knew. Shake the hand of the man from the far distant land, meet him and treat him well. And the young girl so fair with the wind in her hair, she's got a story to tell. So let the circle be wide round the fireside, and we'll soon make room for you. Let your heart have no fear, for there's no strangers here, just friends that you never knew. There are songs to be sung, there are rafters to be rung, there is reason to rosin your bow. There are stories of old and there's new ones to be told, for to carry away when you go. So let the circle be wide round the fireside, and we'll soon make room for you. Let your heart have no fear, for there's no strangers here, just friends that you never knew.
Well, the that song I used to sing for people coming into the house at night, and from the neighbourhood and from all around the place, in fact. But this is a song that I've put a few pictures on it to show you where we're going. Uh, it's about traveling around Ireland, and a few years ago, I decided to do a tour of all the counties in Ireland, every county. There are 32 counties in Ireland, north and south, and I headed off, and I played in some big places like the National Concert Hall in Dublin and Galway Town Hall, and some wonderful guests and guesting with people like Tom Paxton and Peggy Seeger. I also had Maya and Fanon, my children, and my brothers and sister, Anne and Carl and Ben. But I did a lot of it on my own. Played in some big places and some very small places, including the Ireland's own office in the County Wexford. And also, I played in a few hospitals. I played in 3 prisons, uh, 2 graveyards. I went down to Carrick-on-Suir to meet up with the Clancy's. And of course, the Clancy boys no longer with us, sadly. Wonderful group, the Clancy brothers and Tommy Macon, and very dear friends. But their wives were all alive and very well. And we went out to the graves and we sang a song there, and then went in to Dungarvan and did a concert dedicated to the Clancy's. But anyway, this song is about every county in Ireland. In fact, someone told me one time that I had left out a county. So if you notice it, uh, and I have left it out, you can let me know. Here we go.
Go down to Irma and trim her curly hair, for a man above and Derry will take her to the fair. Tie her own wee pony, for Gavin cow as well, and move hand me down the shawl, she walked into the gall. Where are we now?
just another mile round Erin's Island. We'll be everywhere. Out of Ulster into Leicester, more adventure we will venture. Rum, rum, Lish the bull of Cooley, he's loud as loud can be. He'd kill their Uncle Kenny, but he will not kill me. Keep your head down in the Carlo, in case that he is near, and the light down in your window, in case he sees us here. Where are we now? Are we nearly there? Taste a little mead, it's long for to cross. Be careful not to waste need, we can't afford the loss. Try a little beeswax for Dublin back again. And I'd like to thank you awfully for joining this refrain. Where are we now? Are we nearly there? Just another run round Erin's Isle, and we'll be everywhere. Connacht, Munster, Lowland, Highland, every county on the island. Is Ross coming down to Galway or going to Mayo? Or will she on the Sligo to Leitrim, don't you know? Some temporary water for your Cork, then carry on. So Claire, recite your lyric now, and I will end my song. Where are we now? Are we nearly there? Just another mile round Erin's Island. We'll be everywhere. Just another mile round Erin's Island. We'll be everywhere.
Well, I certainly enjoyed that. And I'm still waiting to see if anyone recognized the county, if it was there. The great thing about doing programs like this, you have to learn how to play guitar with both right and left hand, depending on what camera is upon you. Later in the program, actually, we'll be having a little chat with a very important man these days. He's probably one of the best known doctors in the countryside in these islands, Dr. Gabriel Skelly. He is the president of the epidemiology and public health section of the Royal Society of Medicine. And as I say, Gabriel has been involved in the in trying to bring a better situation to the public health system. And we'll be speaking to him after a while. As I say, he's very well known, but there are a few things you may not know about him. And we might be delving into that for the first time on a public forum with Professor Skelly. But I'd like to sing you a song, since we're supposed to be traveling in Europe at the moment. And this is a song which is about a man who left this county of Down many years ago. And I'd like to dedicate it to all our friends in Europe, because with Brexit and all these things, there's all sorts of uncertainties. And perhaps the most important thing of all, even outside of politics, although politics belongs to it, is to approach things in a united sort of way. You know so well today that if someone in another country is not safe, we are not safe either. But this song is about a man called Colin Bennis, who left his country. He was a monk. He traveled to Europe after the Dark Ages, when books and learning had been lost, and he brought light there, and traveled all around Europe. And whenever the European experiment began, the coming together of Europe in the 50s, after 2 world wars, and people were looking at finding ways of stopping war, finding common ground between people. I think it was Robert Schuman, who was the French Foreign Secretary. He suggested that this man, Columbanus, it means white dove. This man should be the patron saint of Europe. And it was Jane Morris of the Women's Coalition, actually, who prompted me to write this song. Jane set up an organization called the White Dove Society. Very interesting one with Monica McWilliams and these great people were a big help in the peace process. But I use the air, that beautiful air of Beethoven, and not Schiller's words, but my own words, which are kind of relevant, I suppose, to here. And I'd like to sing it for you. It's called Ode to Europe. And I'm sure you'll know the melody. And if you want to hum along, that'd be lovely. Europe, a united chorus, joyously in harmony, after years of war and sorrow, learning one day to be free. Free from hatred, free from hunger, free from inhumanity. Raise your voice and sing in chorus, joyously in harmony. White dove sailing on the ocean in the night of dark despair. Bring your light and bring your learning once again for all to share. Share a dream, a new tomorrow, shape a plowshare from the sword. Peace within and peace between, and peace be to the whole wide world. Hum along. Gabriel Skelly, who is president of the epidemiology and the public health section of the Royal Society of Medicine. And it's wonderful to have Gabriel on the program. You see him in programs all over the world these days. But I'm going to show you a photograph from a way back. I wonder, do you remember this, Gabriel?
God, I do. Well, that's Arthur Street.
That's Arthur Street.
It is Arthur indeed. Street in Uri.
Arthur Street in Uri, the Arthur Street Philosophical Society.
The West Arthur Street Philosophical Society.
The West Arthur Street Philosophical Society. And you see, your hair is a bit longer than it is now, and mine is longer now than it was then because I can't get a barber.
I was a very scruffy-looking junior doctor at those days, yeah.
Well, you were doing all sorts of interesting things as well. You're very interested in, everything. You just arrived back from a world event. It was the World Youth Festival.
The World Festival of Youth and Students, yeah, in Havana. It was a great experience. Great experience.
And you were in Daisy Hill at the time. And
I was.
I would like maybe to revisit that time. And it seems a long way, or maybe not, from the West Arthur Street Philosophical Society in Uri and the the president of the Epidemiology Society, where you are today. Where were you since? Because I didn't see too much of you.
Not half enough, did you see of me? So after I'd done a couple of years in Europe, I had a great time in Daisy Hill. It was a lovely hospital to work in and very friendly, and great characters in it. Celsus McRae and Jimmy Blundell, great consultants I worked with, and a lovely group of other junior doctors to work with as well. And then someone had told me I should get in touch with these SANS people, and I'd seen the group, of course, and then I was told if I went and knocked on this door, it would be that would be where you would be found. So I did. I didn't find you at all. I found a French woman answering the door, and that was the start of it all. But after I did 2 years in Daisy Hill, and then I decided I always wanted to go into public health. I was always interested in the big picture of helping to improve the health of lots and lots of people, much as I liked dealing with patients and helping patients. I was always interested in the big things. So I wanted to do public health, but before I could do that, I had to get some more clinical experience under my belt, quite rightly. So I did a general practice training year, and a very interesting time. I did 6 months in Mullaban, and Mullaban was fantastic with Dr. Tony Smith in Mullaban. And I knew him because he'd worked in the hospital as a pediatric doctor. And he took me on as a trainee for 6 months, and I had a great time there. And when I was on call down there, I used to stay with Jerry and Rita O'Hanlon, and I really, really liked the place. It had its moments in the troubles. I had a little blue MG Midget, Tom, if you remember that car, and I used to speed round the roads of South Armagh on it, back and forth across the border. And which I enjoyed enormously. The only scary bit was coming around a corner fast and finding a foot patrol in the middle of the road in front of you, and the brakes weren't that good, and I screeching to a halt 20 or 30 yards past them, and they weren't a bit pleased. But I had a great 6 months there, and then a much more sedate 6 months in Warren Point and Rostrevor, and by that time I was living in Brick Row in Rostrevor, and so I did 6 months in the health centre in Warren Point, which again was great. And then I went off to London to study for a year doing public health.
Before you go there, I just remember, of course, Mullaban, on a misty morning early, as my wandering steps did lead me, down by a farmer's station, his meadow and green lawn. I heard great lamentation that the wee ones they were making, saying we'll have no more engagements with the boys of
Mullaban. Lovely song, isn't it?
Gabriel, it's a beautiful song. And I remember that blue car of yours. I was doing a radio program in Belfast, in downtown radio in Belfast, and my own car was broken, and I borrowed your car. And it was beautiful to be driving it. But after a while, I think it had a soft roof on it as well.
It did, soft top, yeah.
But I was a little bit worried. Maybe it's a Catholic thing to be guilty of everything. But I was worried, am I insured to drive this car or not? Yeah. And doctor's car was written somewhere on it, and I was stopped. There was a whole traffic jam, and it was dark. And this policeman walked up to me, and he said, "You're the very man we need." Doctor's car was written. And I said, "My God, if I say I'm not a doctor, he might say, 'Where's your insurance?'" As it turned out, I was insured, but I didn't know it at the time. So I got out, he was already gone, so I went and followed him. And there was this poor woman who she bumped her nose. It wasn't bad at all, but she was bleeding from her nose, and she took a look at me. She said, "Doctor, I'm not too sure what to do, because the blood was coming out of her nose, and she's putting it in her hand, and then she's putting it in the other hand, thinking maybe it might be useful for again." But eventually, I said, I went to school and I learned about geography and where Timbuktu was, but I never learned much about the human body or what you do with a bleeding nose. But someone had told me that if you pinch your nose and hold back your head, it's a good idea. So I told her that. So anyway, the policeman came back and he says, "All well." I said, "All well." And he says, "Thank you, doctor." I says, "Thank you, sergeant." But anyway, Gabriel, go ahead.
The car. Just to divert on the car again, actually, the one time I remember the car, Hamish Imlach was overstaying and he was doing a gig in Mark's Bar in Dundalk and he had no way of getting there. And I said, "Well, I'll come down with you, Hamish, and I'll take you down." And of course, I hadn't quite got the calculations right because Hamish was not a small man, this large Scottish folk singer. And getting him into my wee MG midget, a little tiny sports car, and his guitar, and to and from Mark's Bar, Dundalk, and the car was bravely overloaded with him.
Just going back a little bit to Hamish Imlach that you mentioned, who was a big influence on Billy Connolly, by the way. But Hamish was fond of a drink.
He was.
As we very euphemistically put it. But I remember one morning he was staying with us and he was shaking the next morning. And I said, "Hamish, you're shaking. It's the only exercise I get."
I remember seeing him in your house with that particular attribution, but he was a masterful, a craftsman, just a fantastic. On that gig when we were in Dundalk, Hamish was up on stage singing in Mark's Bar in Dundalk, and there was a great crowd in, and he stopped dead halfway through a song, and he launched off into a great story. And what happened was he'd broken a string on his guitar and he just stopped the song. And while he was telling this great story, took the old string off, fished one out of his bag, put the new string on, tuned it up and finished the story and off back into the song just where he'd left off. A consummate performer, just fantastic.
Yes.
But after I finished all that, I went off to London to study for a year. I got onto a public health training scheme and I went to London for a year. And I had a great time in London. And I learned so much. I met so many wonderful people in this fantastic international school of public health where I was studying. And I met a lot of people in London and went to a lot of music. I used to go and see Peggy Seeger and Ewan McCall and all sorts of people. And great music, the 100 Club in Oxford Street, and it was just fantastic. And so then I came back and I was working at that time in Ballymena, and I was living at home in Belfast and getting down to Restrever just at weekends. And then I'd met someone in London that I kind of took a notion of, and we ended up getting married, and Rona came and lived in Belfast, and we worked there very happily for a long time. And I kind of made my way up the ranks. So I was Director of Public Health for the Eastern Board in those days. And I was there for 5 years as Director of Public Health, and all sorts of interesting things there, setting up young people's sexual health services, which got me into trouble, of course, with those people who thought young people shouldn't be having sex, and I was only encouraging them and all that stuff. And then I got asked to go to London, or to England, to a big job, or a very big job, a regional job. And I thought, yep. And at that time, actually, Tom, I was kind of in dismay about the troubles that seemed to me to have been going on half my life, or more than half my life, and there was no sign of it ending. And getting the offer to play Premier League, really, in the public health world. And so I went off to England. So I've been in England now since 1993, and I'm still here. I live in Bristol, and I've had a great career.
Well, Gabriel, you met up with Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger in London, and indeed just a year ago or so, you presented the Creative Arts Award to Peggy Seeger, and it was wonderful to see the two of you together, Gabriel. But you also see the value in song and in that song tradition, and you being a great advocate of public health here and in the UK and so on. You actually, I believe you wrote a song about the public health system. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it if you wouldn't mind giving it to us.
It's about it's about public health and the people in the history of public health who've really done so much to improve public health, and heroes, people like that people will have heard of. Edward Jenner, the man who really produced smallpox vaccination in an effective way. And some you mightn't have heard of, John Snow, who found the cause of cholera and the spread by water in London, and very important man. And Edwin Chadwick, a great reformer, a lawyer in the Poor Law Commission in England, set the basis for the whole development of the public health system. And a woman, that isn't honoured enough in the north of Ireland, a woman called Kitty Wilkinson from Derry, who went to Liverpool, and at a tragic arrival in Liverpool, the ship foundered and some of her family were drowned. But she lived in Liverpool and married again. And when cholera came to Liverpool, she, her own kind of instincts, community instincts, she set up a big cauldron in the backyard of her house and set it up as a washroom, really, for the neighbourhood. And cholera is a terrible disease, but it really doesn't do anything for the bed linen. And they would bring bed linen from the community there and boil it up in her cauldron and have it dried and so on, so that they'd clean linen to try and stop the plague. And a very famous woman in her time, and there's a window to her in the Anglican Cathedral in Liverpool. Anyway, I could go on about these heroes forever. Anyway, so I decided I'd sing a song, and I thought it was, and I sort of put it a bit like a calling on song, where you're introducing characters to the audience. So it goes something like this. Come, all of you men and you women who work for the welfare of all, come and listen to this song while I tell you of how we must answer the call. We have all come from far distant places and traveled by road and by rail. We have come to learn from each other that hygiene and health might prevail. Edward Jenner, he did walk among us. He studied both cuckoo and pox. Sarah Nelms helped him defeat the virus, though many his efforts did mock. John Snow, he was a great hero. His deeds, they are famed and renowned. But without the poor widow of Hampstead, sure the truth it would never be known. Kitty Wilkinson, she came from Ireland, in Liverpool cholera did meet, and her wash house it shone like a beacon, helped the people the peril defeat. Edwin Chadwick, he was but a lawyer, he knew not of physic or blade, but his work, it laid the foundations on which all of our progress is made. So never forget where we came from and the heroes we honor today, and the poor people who stood right beside them. Together they showed us the way, that health is the real wealth of nations. That's a truth that none can deny. So let all of our people be healthy, and let poverty perish and die. There you are, Tom.
Beautiful, beautiful, Gabriel. Beautiful. Is that your own song?
It is, yeah. And unusually, I actually wrote it all up and published it in a medical journal. It's the only one that's been. I suspect it's the only contemporary song that's appeared in a proper medical journal. And a couple of people do perform it at public health gatherings and meetings and things like that. So that's nice. I think the history of these things is so important. We need to know about. If you don't know about your history, you're doomed to repeat your mistakes. And never more true is that than at this moment in time with this awful virus plaguing us.
Well, Gabriel, leading on from you, as I say, you have been and always and still are a great advocate of the public health system. what shape was it in to face a pandemic when that came along?
Well, it depends where you're talking about, Tom, interestingly enough, because there was the emergence of an earlier coronavirus called SARS, and you'll remember SARS, and it shot around the world and killed quite a lot of people. It was a very, very nasty virus, but it wasn't quite as easily transmitted as this one. And the places where it originated in the Far East, in the countries who were affected, took that very seriously, and they set about putting in place very good arrangements what to do about the emergence of another novel virus or bacteria or whatever sort of thing comes at us. And some of those countries have been extraordinarily well prepared, snapped into action, and have saved thousands and thousands of lives in their countries. On the other hand, here we haven't done as well. As you know, the UK is topping the list for the number of deaths in Europe, and likely to be along. Well, it could actually be the country with the biggest number of deaths per head of population in the world by the time this is finished. And we weren't in good shape for a whole string of reasons, largely to do with austerity and the way in which austerity was imposed, and the restrictions on spending on health and preparations on health. Reorganizations, I couldn't tell you the number of health service reorganizations in England I went through, and at each was a step backwards, and you had to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and get the whole system running again. And there was a really terrible lack of preparation for such a pandemic as this, in terms of the plans and as we know, the stocks of personal protective equipment. And I think most worryingly is the way in which the public health function has kind of withered away over the last 10 years. I resigned very publicly from my very senior post in the Department of Health in 2012 because I was so unhappy with the way things were going, and I wasn't prepared to spend any more time being paid a very generous salary for dismantling everything I'd spent the rest of my working life to put together. And so it has proven to be that the public health system hasn't been fit for purpose. And I think our politicians have made bad decisions, and they haven't had the right advice along the way. And clearly the preparations weren't in place, and we're paying the price for that. And we're going to go on paying the price for that until this particular pandemic is over.
Gabriel, you mentioned in your song about some of the heroes, and the I suppose the etymology of the word hero comes from the Greek meaning protector, and I think we put so much emphasis on defense, defending the nation, and so on, but people are persuaded that that means getting a gun and running 1,000 miles away to defend your own place, whereas actually the defense of people's health is so important.
It is indeed. Just to go back to the hero business, I'm not a great fan of hero history and heroes. There's a great line in one of Bertolt Brecht's plays, Life of Galileo, unhappy the land that needs heroes. And I think that's very, very true, which is why I talk about the plain people in that song as well, who really made the difference. And yeah, we haven't invested, and there has been a public health crisis going on in Northern Ireland and in Britain for some time now, and it's manifest by the fact that our life expectancy has stopped improving. Now, this is the first time this has happened in over 100 years outside wartime, that life expectancy has stopped improving. Our health's always got better because we always made collective efforts to make it better, and our lives better, and our living conditions better, our environment better in so many ways over the last century or so. But we've stopped doing that. And as a result, our life expectancy, not only has it stopped getting better, but for some people, particularly women, and particularly those in the less well-off parts of the UK, their life expectancy has actually been dropping in this last number of years. And to go from that situation of a really big, it's not a headline-grabbing public health crisis, but for me, it says everything about the state of the country and the state of the body politic and the state of our feeling about looking after people and that collectivity. To go into a pandemic as such a serious thing in a already weakened state, both organizationally and in terms of the health of the population, it could hardly be worse. That's one of the problems people keep talking. The politicians keep talking about being led by the science. We're following the science. Well, you can't have science when you don't know very much, and we don't know very much about this virus. We're still learning all the time. So it's almost inevitable that errors will be made. But the characteristics of a good system and a good public health response is you act early, you go in hard as possible with your action to try and eradicate whatever virus it is or whatever bug it is that's causing the problem. And you don't hesitate, and you don't have any regrets, and you just act and do the right thing to protect people's health. Now, this government didn't do that. They said, oh, it wasn't yet time to do such and such, and that was repeatedly their story. Whereas the time to do it is the time to do it, and that's as soon as you possibly can. And the second thing is, even when you get things wrong, there is hope for a system if someone will say, we got that wrong, and we're going to change it, and we're going to do it differently. And that was a mistake, by the way, and we're very sorry, but we are going to do better. Now, I get no sense of anyone being prepared to say that anything was done wrong at all. And a blind man on a fast horse could tell you that there were serious errors made. Everyone knows that. And then it becomes a sort of an ingrained habit, and you get stuck in this and it is the ultimate Westminster bubble that the politicians talk about. You have this very narrowly focused group in London making all these decisions in the assumption that they apply in the same way to everyone, and that's manifestly not true. There was an opportunity in large bits of Britain and in Northern Ireland to act faster, earlier, when the disease was still in its early stages, and hundreds and thousands of people would still be alive if they'd done that. That's my view, anyway. And I don't think you get too much argument with it these days.
What advice would you have to give to Northern Ireland here, Gabriel, the North?
Well, actually, in this last few days, I've been greatly heartened by some of the things that have happened. The government, the Assembly executive produced a plan the other day on Tuesday, which was actually very good and very sensible. And it talked about the World Health Organization criteria for lifting the lockdown. And that's the ones, those are the criteria to use, not the tests, the 5 tests that Boris Johnson and his colleagues seem to think are important. And it also committed to doing what was stopped in early March, which is actually chasing this virus, identifying people with the symptoms who've been infected, tracing their contacts, isolating them, the people with the virus and their contacts, to make sure it can't spread any further, and then starting and doing that again and again and again. So you really, really clamp down on the virus. And there is a real problem. There isn't enough testing going on. And what testing is going on in hospitals and care homes and with key workers, but it's not happening in the community. And the experts looking at it say that there are about 20,000 new cases of infection with the virus every day in the UK. And the only way to get hold of that is to go after it and actively chase it and actively stop it spreading. And that's what other countries have done. And Ireland has a fantastic opportunity as an island to make use of the island advantage, as I call it, and really cooperate together, north and south. And there's some things that are good in the north, and there's some things that are good in the south. But I think it's absolute madness not to take advantage of that island advantage and cooperate and have a joint, harmonized approach to dealing with this desperate disease. But I think there are some grounds for optimism now. I think the politicians in Northern Ireland are beginning to find their own way and look at the best way of dealing with it for Northern Ireland, which is a great thing.
Gabriel, you have been appearing on radios and television channels all over the world in the past couple of weeks or so, and you've been asked all sorts of questions. I wonder, is there any question that you haven't been asked that you think is worthy of being answered?
Well, there is, Tom. There's one question that I sort of haven't wanted to be asked, and thankfully no one has asked it until you ask me what's the question I haven't been asked, and it's about what I don't want to be asked is, now once we've got this over, are we going to be all right then for 100 years or something? And the answer to that question is no. And the hard truth is that once we have this virus dealt with, there could be another one along anytime. And there'll be a lot of countries that'll be better prepared and hopefully will deal with it, but we might get an even worse virus that finds some new way to attack us that we haven't come across before. So we could have to start all this over again. It might not happen for 100 years, but it might happen in 1 year. So there's a lot of hard work to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves down, mourn those that have passed on, rebuild our communities and our economy, and then prepare to make sure we're not caught the same way again in these islands. And I think that's extraordinarily important to do.
Gabriel, thank you very much. And to err, I suppose, on the side of caution at all times.
Yeah, the precautionary principle, Tom. If you have a chance to prevent something, prevent it. And don't wait, don't hang around. Just, if there's a problem, get in front of it and prevent it.
A little bit of care takes the edge off bad luck, as they say around here.
That's a good one.
I'm here at home at the moment. Gabriel, you're at home in Bristol. I'm in Rostrevor. You're in Bristol, far apart. But I suppose, I think it was Pete Seeger said one time, I wonder, will technology help us to save ourselves before we destroy ourselves with it? And I suppose this technology is one of the great ways of proving maybe that technology can better itself. Well, we're heading towards an opening up, if you like, at this stage, it would seem. How much can we open up?
But it's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take some months before things start really relaxing, I think, and we'll not be properly safe until we have an effective vaccination and some decent treatments. And there are plenty of people working away at doing those. In the meantime, you know, we've got things to do. It's most amazing how people are working from home as much as they possibly can. And I think we'll see a lot of people reevaluating their lives, especially those who've got long commutes to work and things like that. And they might think, well, this, you know, in some ways has taught me the value of being at home with my family. And maybe I don't want to hit the road quite as much as I often did to get on the train or the bus or whatever it is, and work out new ways of doing the things that we really want to do. So I'm as ever, I'm an optimist, even though, you know, there is that old saying, an optimist is someone who hasn't heard the bad news yet. But I think we've had the bad news, so it's time for a bit of optimism.
Okay. Gabriel, before you go, would you give us an all one?
I will, Tom. This is a great song. I think it's a great song. It's a contemporary song, and it's by Sean Moan, who's a great songwriter. You know, and this one sums up a lot of my own views, I suppose, and values, anyway. And it's called Lovers and Friends.
Lovely.
Battles and wars leave deep wounds and scars, and deep wounds are long in the mending. While reflecting upon all that is gone, life rushes on to its ending. The joys and the pain in the memory remain, and by memories lifetimes are measured. But the time that we spend among lovers and friends are the times we remember with pleasure. So fill up your glass that future and past in harmony be determined. There's more friendship poured out in one bottle of stout than you'll find in statute or sermon. I've heard all the old songs, all the rights, all the wrongs, all the prophets of doom and destruction, street corner messiahs and moral pariahs, and dealers in bribes and corruption, denials and lies from the holy and wise, while innocent youth was forsaken. But I've seen the night end among lovers and friends, and been sorry to see the dawn breaking. So fill up your glass, that future and past in harmony be determined. There's more friendship poured out in one bottle of stout than you'd find in statute or sermon.
Gabriel Skelly, very wise man, and I suppose very often people think that musicians emote and don't think. Some people think that thinkers think and don't emote, but the coming together of both is very important. And lots and lots of reaction and comments from so many people, so many great friends that I'd love to say hello to individually, and I will actually when I get a chance. When this program's over, I'll have a look at all those wonderful things, and I'll drop you a line as well. Christina O'Shaughnessy from the borders of France and Switzerland, she asked me to sing a song. Christina, I don't have time to sing that song tonight, unfortunately, but I will if we have a program next week. I will. It's the oldest song ever to be sung in Ireland, and you know, people talk about Chaucer being the father of literature in these places. This goes way back beyond Chaucer or any of them boys. But thank you so much for keeping me company. I hope you enjoyed the program. And we're going to finish off with a song that I wrote some years ago. I'm not going to sing it. A group of people are going to sing it. They do such a beautiful job on it. And they come from the County Down. They come from GAA clubs, Gaelic Athletic Association clubs here in the County Down. And I'd like to dedicate it to John Murphy, who was buried yesterday at Great Down Football. From me, Tommy Sands, be quiet. Good night.
When you're out walking and there's no one near you, the voice keeps calling and you hear you're near. It's not the leaves or the whispering breezes, it's me that's calling you back again. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? As you roll through lonely London time, when evening's falling, you'll hear me calling. Come on home now to the mighty time. Do you remember the fiddler's play? The songs and stories all night long.
It's a land that you thought of leaving.
It seems so strange now as you walk home. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? As you roll through lonely London time, when evening's falling, you'll hear me calling. Come on home now to the mighty time. heart and say, on Clanryan River, the teams are sporting in open glen. My heart no longer can leave the cheering. When you're not playing, it's a different game. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? As you roam through lonely London town. When evening's falling, you'll hear me calling. Come on home night to the country town. I'm always thinking that things are changing and that they're building a factory tall, and young ones needed again in glory. But I still need you most of all. Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? As you roam through lonely London town. When evening's falling, you'll hear me calling. Come on home night to the country town. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? As we go through lonely London town. When evening's falling, you'll hear me calling. Come on home.